So we talked about, let's see, we got through Freud, we got through a whole bunch of different stuff, learning theories, humanistic trait theories. Somebody else just came in. Let me see who that is. Oh, I don't know yet. And we're going to talk about today biological theories. So behavior genetics is the study of the relationship between heredity and behavior, actually, and personality as it comes to personality, which is what we're studying now. We'll see a bit more about this, but the main five personality factors, which we're going to talk about today. Oh, wait, we already did. That was trait theory. So, openness, conscientiousness, and so forth, have about 50% rate of heritability, variations 20 to 50%. And on the other hand, environmental influences, so nurture, accounts for about half of personality traits as well. And a lot of twin and adoption studies find support for a genetic influence. So definitely part of your personality is inherited to that extent. It is temperament that you are born with, basically. You're born with it, right? And so the largest twin study ever, the Minnesota twin study, okay, you have a link there that you can go to if you want. Remember, you always have a PDF of my PowerPoints on Canvas. So when you're studying or just want to know more about it, just download them and you have it, right? Yeah, identical twins are more similar to each other than fraternal twins are. So monozygotic are identical, dizygotic fraternal, two different, completely different. The Jim twins, we talked about the Jim twins before. We actually saw a little video of it. And they were separated, reunited at 39. And as we saw, they had a lot of similarities in personality and personal habits. This is a little video. We did see some about them before, but I think we have time to go and look at this. Let's see, I couldn't play it in my earlier class today. I was being stupid, but hopefully it'll work now. And Sarai just came in, so let me mark Sarai. Okay.
Happy to accept the idea that physical characteristics like speed and endurance have a strong genetic component. Fast dogs are bred from parents who are fast. But when it comes to us, to our personality and the choices we make in life, we feel differently. The idea that we are all running around a track, following some predetermined genetic script, is repellent. But some twin stories really make you wonder. Now, the story of Jimmy and Margaret is pretty surprising. It's nothing compared with the astonishing story of the Jim twins. Meet Jim Lewis and Jim Springer. They have different surnames and they don't look much alike, but they are identical twins. The Jims were separated as babies and were reunited when they were 39 years old.
It was a very good, warm feeling, It's like you had some of the favorite of yours and you lost it and you had to have it, and you finally find it, it's a good feeling, you find that thing. Well, that's what is the gym? Words came, really saying.
When the Jims met for the first time, they discovered that their lives were peppered with bizarre coincidences.
My first wife's name was Linda. My first wife's name was Linda. I divorced Linda and married Betty. And then the second wife's name was Betty. And they all married to Sandy. Well, she's kind of leery that this whole time I never come across her a Sandy. So I got interested in woodwork. My father. I've been doing woodworking for quite a long time. My first son's name was James Allen. My first son is James Allen. My favorite beer was Miller Lite, and I've always smoked Salem cigarettes. My favorite beer is Miller Lite. Smoke at night, I smoke Camel Light, and then I smoke Salem Light too, but that's what I have to do. I was in the sheriff's department in Miami County as a deputy. I was deputy sheriff for 7 years.
It's impossible to fathom the odds for some of the Jim's coincidences. The information is simply not available. But for some of the habits they shared, we can do the calculations.
I believe the two Jims met in 1979. Each was driving a Chevrolet. It turns out, according to the experts, that the chances of any one man driving a Chevrolet then were 7 to 1. Now, both men driving a Chevrolet would therefore be 49 to 1. They were also both heavy smokers and heavy drinkers. And the chances of any two men both being heavy drinkers would be about 35 to 1. And at that time, in 1979, the chance of any two men both being heavy smokers was about 300 to 1. Well, the chances of each one of these on its own isn't really that surprising. But if you put them all together, the overall coincidence is really rather amazing.
To get the odds of all the similarities being down to pure coincidence, you have to multiply them together. In betting terms, it's called an accumulator. And these figures give you odds of 500,000 to 1 against two men sharing those habits by pure chance. Same sort of odds I might get here on any one dog winning every race till the end of the season.
All right, you guys have the idea. It's extremely, this is big proof, and they're not, the Minnesota Twin Studies is further proof. A lot of evidence of the genetic heritability part of personality. So here is another chart that kind of gives you an idea for the big 5 personality factors that we talked about on Monday. And this is data from 696 twin pairs. So either identical twins or fraternal twins. So identical twins have a correlation about 45% and fraternal 22%. And if you look here, you can see that for neuroticism, so the orange is monozygotic or identical twins, and the green is dizygotic or fraternal twins, and this is the correlation of scores. And we can see it is really high across the board. It's the highest here is openness, right, for identical twins, and much lower for dizygotic or fraternal twins. So this is all evidence for the heritability of personality. Now, on the other hand, there's a lot of cultural things that are different. So we have Hofstadt's 4 dimensions of cultural personality with 64 countries. 4 basic dimensions along which culture is different as far as personality and things that are related, individualism, collectivism, and so forth. And uncertainty avoidance, that's just a tolerance for uncertainty or ambiguity, right? And this varies across countries. So for example, if you live in a more collectivist country, such as China, you are going to have a less individualistic and more collectivist personality versus like US is more individualistic. So there is also evidence that we learn. So as usual, it's always both nature and nurture, but, oops, I didn't have it in the slide. But, and of course, we talked about on Monday, we talked about how situational factors influence your personality, and there's an interaction at any given moment. You have your basic core personality, but how you behave or feel in any one situation does depend on that situation. So nature and nurture in a lot of things. So let's go on to the most fun part of this chapter, which is personality assessment. Did anyone here do the Harry Potter sorting thing? No, well, that's extra credit. You guys should do it. What we are going to do now, well, let's first go through this. Personality assessment depends on what, your theory of personality. This is basic assessment is just measurement of personality. How do we discover the extent to which someone is open to experience or agreeable or so forth from the big 5 we talked about? So behaviorists, you will be unsurprised to hear, they're really interested in observable behavior, right? They assume that personality is just habit, right? Ingrained habit. So the way that behaviorists assess personality is through observation. Okay, so a researcher or a professional therapist or something watches the client or participants in a study, how they observe, and they just rate them, right? So there's two ways that they write down the behavior and code it. They can either use a rating scale or frequency count. A rating scale is just when you assign, okay, so you like have a 1 to 10 scale and you assign types of behavior to different numbers. So say you're trying to measure aggression, okay? And maybe 0 is when no aggression at all. And maybe a 1 is when someone's just kind of raising their voice. Maybe a 2 is when someone's getting in someone's personal space, their bubble a little bit too much. You could be a 10, it'll be like punching someone. So that will be a rating scale. You could also rate, I don't know, helpfulness, okay? From 0, not helpful at all, to 10, you know, picking up, helping someone stand up if they fall. So that's a rating scale. Frequency count just means counting behaviors. So back to our aggression example, if you're looking at a playground and want to measure aggressive behaviors, well, it's just how many times does a little boy or girl act in an aggressive way? So, you know, pushes someone, it's a 1, gets in someone's face, it's a 1, 2. So it's just you add them up, okay? So that's the difference there. That's how a behaviorist would assess personality, openness, like how often do they like pick up something and look at something new, things like that, right? Interviews, another way, so we're going to see more about that. This is just when a professional has a client, so, and it could also be a professional like a clinical psychologist or a researcher could do the same thing. Basically, the person being interviewed is asked questions and then answers. And we're going to see some examples here in a little bit. One of the things you have to take into account here is the halo effect, right? It is what it sounds like, you know, a halo. This is the idea that very charismatic or charming personalities tend to influence the interviewer because they're charming and charismatic, then the interviewer is going to have a more positive impression of them and is more likely to score them in a positive way. Does that make sense? So that's called the halo effect. Perhaps the most common form of personality assessment is the inventory, personality inventory. That's just a pen and, pencil and paper or a computerized test where you answer a lot of questions to different statements, like maybe agree or disagree to the statement, I enjoy meeting new people. Okay, and if you strongly agree, you'd be more of an extrovert. And if you strongly disagree, you'd be more of an introvert, right? And they add them up and they have a score. This is a very mathematical way. Of course, it also has its issues like social desirably responding. People don't like to say, I like to punch people. So, you have to be tricky about how you ask things, right? And based on the 5-factor model that we saw, so we talked a little bit about it on Monday. So the NEO-PI is based on that. Myers-Briggs has a whole bunch of questions based on Jung's theory of personality types and other theories. Has anybody taken a Myers-Briggs? Sometimes you have to do it for a job. I had to do it in high school. Like my senior year, they had us all take a Myers-Briggs, and then they told us like what professions we should look into. And I had like bartender and model. Like, hey, too short to be a model and too young to be a bartender. But yeah, so grain of salt with these things. The MMPI-2 is really the whole purpose is to detect abnormal behavior or thinking patterns in personality, personality disorders, and so forth. So self-report, so inventories are self-report, such as the Myers-Briggs. Basically, you just have a whole bunch of questions and you answer them. These are the cheapest to administer, the fastest to administer, and the most psychometrically sound. What does this mean? That they have a better chance of accurately measuring the personality trait that people are interested in, compared to the other ones that we're going to see in a minute, and you'll understand why. If you're interested, so yourmorals.org is really a whole group of researchers that are interested in morality and political ideology and all sorts of different things. They have online tests. There's tons and tons of inventories and scales that you can do online. It associates them, at least last time I was on the site, automatically with your political orientation. So for example, if you say I'm an independent or a libertarian or a Democrat or a Republican, will say, well, most Democrats say this and you score here or here or whatever. And they're looking at all sorts of interesting things if you want to have a look at that. So now I'm going to ask you guys to go to this and do this little personality test. So go ahead and go to this link. Remember, that's case sensitive with your phones, and do that test. It's kind of fun. You guys online, I will actually put that into the chat so it's easier for you to copy it. At least I think I will. Oh, wait. So I don't know if I can. Actually, you could just copy it too, because it's a different computer than it is here. So it's just copy out the link carefully, and then you guys can do that test there. I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes. Just when you're done, just let me know, and then I'll have everybody talk about it. I'll check in 3 minutes. That should give you enough. It's pretty easy. But let me pause the recording, actually. Just resume. Okay, I forgot a tiny bit. So the Barnum effect is just the tendency to believe things like horoscopes and personality descriptions as accurate. Okay, they always tell you stuff that's going to sound positive enough and negative enough that you might believe it. If you do believe it, it's called the Barnum effect. Usually all of these things apply to so many people that, yeah, all of us, we're all a little bit extroverted, a little bit introverted. They just make them so generalized that we're going to believe them. But yeah, it's not really the thing. So now we're going to move on to another really interesting category of tests. And the thing that distinguishes this from the Harry Potter and the color test really is just that they really use these things for a long time. They still use them. Okay, see, these are assessments that what they do is they show usually clients, because these usually take place in a therapist client situation, or a clinician, a clinic. They ask the client to respond with whatever comes to mind. This is called free association. You look at a picture and you just associate it with one thing, or you just explain it, right? And the idea here is that people project their personality characteristics or the problems they're having onto ambiguous stimuli. Now, remember projection we talked about on Monday? So that's the defense mechanism where you project your own unacceptable thoughts on another person. You do it unconsciously. Remember Freud's id and the unconscious we talked about on Monday, right? And the idea here is you project onto these ambiguous stimuli. And the two big ones are the Rorschach ink blot test and the thematic apperception test. Has anybody seen the ink blot test? Anyone done it? No, no one here, no one online. Okay, so let's look at them. This is the most frequently used for years and years, okay? There's 10 ambiguous ink blots as stimuli, and the therapist or maybe the researcher, if they're using it in research, asks, what do you see? Answers aren't right, they're wrong, but they're supposed to reveal unconscious concerns or your personality, right? So here's an example. A therapist or researcher might show a client this picture and ask them, what do you see? Let's see if we can see this better. Yeah, see, that's a little bit better. Now it's dark. Well, we'll leave it dark for a minute. So what do you guys see in this? Anybody? Two babies? Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Anyone online?
I would answer, but there's a loud lawnmower right next to my window.
There's a lawnmower. I can't hear your lawnmower.
You can't?
No.
Oh, wow, that's obnoxious. Well, I see like a butterfly
A butterfly.
and
Yeah,
like an
well,
airplane or something like that in the
an
middle.
airplane. I had someone this morning see an airplane. Anything else? You guys see anything else? How about the next one? What about that?
Oh, that's definitely like a moth right there.
A monster or a moth?
A moth.
Oh,
A
okay.
moth.
So you can see that. So that's Darius talking. So if he were in therapy and he says a monster, which he didn't, I understood that. Well, that would tell the therapist one thing. Seeing a moth might tell him something else. And does anybody else see something here that's not a moth? I tend to see a pelvis, which I'm not quite sure what that means. But if I were in therapy, then my therapist would take some notes and maybe try to draw some conclusions about my underlying issues, right? Here's another one. And again, this is from the actual original ink blot test. which you cannot get, like online, most of the things you see are not because they're published, you can't get access. So what about this one? Anyone see something interesting here? Like what? Hold your mask out like this in the
It
dark.
kind of looks like the female reproductive system.
Female reproductive
That's-
system.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say
Oh,
too.
we have a second for the female reproductive system. Yeah, it kind of does, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see some seahorses up there too. So anyway, they would look at this, and this is still used today, especially with psychoanalysis, right? Another thing they use, we're gonna see some more, is what the TAT, the thematic apperception test. And these are 20 pictures of people in ambiguous situations. And the client or the participant in research is asked to kind of explain what's happening, what they see there. So let's look at an example. So the therapist or the researcher would show this picture to a client or a participant and say, when you look at this picture, what story does it suggest to you? Who are the people? What is their relationship like? And they just give the client time to answer in detail. So does anybody want to posit a story for this? What's going on here? Yeah?
It looks like these, the person is the friend, is the worker, is doing wrong. And then advocacy looks like the boss is observing what.
Okay, so we have the worker, the one in the apron, and the boss observing. And do you think that positive vibes are going on here or negative? What's the relationship here? Negative, right? It looks more negative. And so, a therapist might use this to try to get an idea of, I don't know, maybe how their client's relationship at work is or how they feel about their job, right? Here's another one here. What about this one? A little boy and a violin. What's happening here?
He doesn't look like he wants to do that.
He doesn't look like he wants to play the violin anymore, right?
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Or he's frustrated from not knowing a certain note.
Could be he's frustrated. Could be he's sad. I've had one student a couple semesters ago said, oh, his grandfather died and the violin used to be his grandfather's. So what the therapist would do is kind of try to draw some conclusions from these things. And here's my favorite one that I show. What about this one? Anyone have an idea for this one? No? Man, you guys are less imaginative. I've had one student told me that, that the person in the foreground, the woman, was in love with the man who was actually married to the pregnant woman leaning against the tree, although I don't know if she's pregnant or not. You get all sorts of interesting things. So the idea here is that the way, let me turn the lights back on. That the way the client describes the people in here and their relationship is supposed to reveal things about the client's relationships in real life and about how they interpret things, or about their personality and so forth. So, okay, let's see a little bit of his issues. Here's who uses which method. As I said, psychoanalysts are the main people who use the projective test, and a few researchers who are interested in it, right? Interviews are used by psychoanalysts, humanistic. So remember we talked about the humanistic, the unconditional positive regard, and just, interviews there. Also researchers use interviews as well. We talked about in the developmental chapter how Kohlberg used interviews, for example, but not just as personality necessarily. But morality, which is another thing with individual differences, right? Behaviorists, the behavioral assessments, direct observation with rating scales and frequency counts are behavioral and social cognitive therapists. And then finally, the trait theorists, and everybody who's a researcher and wants to publish in personality uses personality inventories. They are by far the easiest. They're also used by some clinicians, okay, yeah. And who uses them also? A business. Businesses are really big into things like Myers-Briggs and different inventories just because they want to have an idea of how a future employee is going to react in their workplace dynamic, right? So projective tests are problematic. So remember we talked about, I think on Monday, how computers have made certain things like factor analysis and these inventories easier. And with those, we really don't have to spend that kind of time. Projective tests take a lot of time. These were long, hour-long interviews waiting for people to make free associations. So that's the give his or her interpretation of the block, the blot or the pictures and the TAT. Time, you have to just let the client talk, right? You can't be rushing them. You have to take them down. You make a lot of training so you can code them properly. The inquiry phase is when the tester is asking what it is about the blot that prompted said interpretation. So here we go. First, we have an ink blot, and they tell them, just tell you what you see in this. And then after that, the clinician or tester says, well, why did you interpret it that way? Okay, why did you think the little boy doesn't want to play his violin anymore? And this is also important, because that's when you say, well, that would reveal more issues, like all that stuff under that in the iceberg that we saw on Monday, right? A lot of problems with subjective tests, with projective tests. They are subjective. Okay, not only is it depend on the person, the client who's giving those interpretations, so that depends on a lot of different things. It's also when it comes to the way that the clinician or the tester rates it and scales it and so forth, that's also subjective. So there's no standardization, okay, from one therapist to another and so forth. They're not very reliable, they're not very valid. Remember, we talked about one of the main goals of psychology is predicting behavior and outcomes. You can't predict a lot from results of projective tests, okay, so that's very problematic. Here is your extra credit, the Hogwarts sorting. So don't forget to do this if you want 5 points extra credit. Most of you are here are probably doing okay. So here's Myers-Briggs. Here's some different, based on Cattell stuff, different personality tests. 2 different ones you can do as well. And don't forget my PDFs and my PowerPoints are always online. And any questions on personality, on our personality chapter? No? Okay, well, let's go on and try to get a little start on chapter 14. Oh, and let me stop the recording and start it again.